The Xantharian High Command had always prided themselves on their defensive mastery. For 3 millennia, their civilization had perfected the art of protection, energy barriers that could deflect plasma bombardments, gravitational shields that bent space itself, quantum scramblers that made their fleets untouchable by conventional targeting systems. When the primitive species from Sol 3 first ventured beyond their home system, the Xantharians barely paid attention. That was their first mistake. Admiral Keithaval studied the tactical display with satisfaction as the human fleet approached the outer perimeter of Xantharian space. 12 primitive vessels, crude metal constructs that barely qualified as starships by galactic standards. Their weapons were laughably simple: kinetic projectiles, primitive fusion warheads, and what appeared to be modified mining lasers. "Activate the Aegis grid," Keithval commanded, his crystalline features gleaming under the bridge's blue illumination. "Let's show these mammals what real technology looks like." The space around the Xantharian defensive positions shimmered as layers upon layers of energy shields materialized. The outermost barrier could absorb the combined firepower of a dozen star destroyers. The second layer utilized quantum entanglement to redirect incoming projectiles into parallel dimensions. The innermost shield was their masterpiece, a temporal distortion field that slowed incoming attacks to a crawl, giving their automated defenses unlimited time to neutralize threats. It was impenetrable. It was perfect. It was completely useless against what the humans brought. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Mjolnir, watching the alien shields flicker to life like aurora across the void. Her weathered face showed no concern, only the grim satisfaction of someone whose calculations were proving correct. "Analysis confirms our intelligence reports," her tactical officer announced. 3-layer defensive matrix, exactly as the captured Xantharian databases indicated. Energy absorption, dimensional deflection, and temporal dilation. "Good," Chen nodded. "Deploy the hammers." The human fleet split into 4 groups, each taking position at cardinal points around the Xantharian stronghold. What happened next defied every principle of space warfare that the galaxy had known for millennia. The humans didn't fire energy weapons at the shields. They didn't launch missiles or deploy fighters. Instead, each ship began rotating massive cylindrical structures that had been mistaken for cargo modules. These cylinders, each the size of a city block, started spinning faster and faster until they blurred with velocity. Then they released their contents. Millions of tungsten spheres, each no larger than a marble, erupted from the spinning drums. But these weren't random projectiles. They had been precisely calculated, engineered with obsessive human attention to detail. Each sphere followed a trajectory that would take it on a long, elliptical orbit around the local star, before returning to this exact position in space. The Xantharians watched in confusion as the tiny projectiles harmlessly struck their shields and were absorbed or deflected. Keithval actually laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Is this their master strategy? Throwing pebbles at our defenses?" But Commander Chen was already issuing her next order. "All ships execute Protocol Sisyphus. Begin continuous deployment." For the next 6 hours, the human ships methodically released their tungsten spheres in precisely calculated waves. Millions became billions, billions became trillions. Each projectile followed its own unique orbital path, timed to return at carefully staggered intervals. The Xantharians began to understand when the first wave returned. The spheres came back not as individual projectiles but as streams, constant rivers of tungsten, moving at significant fractions of light speed after their solar slingshot maneuvers. The shields absorbed them easily, but now they had to absorb them continuously. Energy reserves began to drain. "This is impossible," Keithval muttered as his defensive coordinator reported the mounting power requirements. "They're just throwing rocks at us."
"Rocks, but the rocks kept coming."
And coming. And coming. The humans had studied Xantharian shield technology for months after capturing one of their outposts. They had identified the fundamental flaw in the aliens' defensive philosophy. The shields were designed to stop sophisticated attacks, not simple ones. Every barrier, no matter how advanced, had a maximum absorption capacity. The Xantharians had built their defenses to withstand the most powerful weapons imaginable, but they had never considered what would happen if someone simply threw an endless stream of pebbles at them. 12 hours into the bombardment, the outer shield flickered and failed. The tungsten streams, now numbering in the quadrillions and following thousands of different orbital patterns, began striking the second barrier. The dimensional deflection system, designed to handle discrete attacks, became overwhelmed trying to redirect the continuous flow of projectiles. "Sir," the Xantharian tactical officer reported with growing panic, "the quantum scramblers are overheating. The system was never designed for this volume of simultaneous deflections." 18 hours in, the second shield collapsed. 24 hours after the first tungsten sphere was released, the temporal distortion field, the Xantharians' ultimate defense, began to buckle under the sheer mass of incoming projectiles. The field could slow down individual attacks, but when faced with continuous streams of matter flowing from multiple directions, it simply couldn't process the load. Kethaval stared at the tactical display in horror as his impregnable fortress became a shooting gallery. The crude human projectiles, now moving at tremendous velocities after their stellar assists, began striking Xantharian installations directly. The damage wasn't from any sophisticated warhead or energy discharge. It was simple kinetic force, transferred from tiny spheres moving at relativistic speeds. But the humans weren't finished. As the last Xantharian shield failed, Commander Chen gave her final order: "Deploy the sledgehammers." The human ships released their secondary payloads, tungsten rods the size of telephone poles, each one following the same orbital mechanics that had delivered the spheres. But these were designed for a different purpose entirely. When the rods returned from their solar flyby 3 days later, they struck the now defenseless Xantharian installations with the force of nuclear weapons. The aliens, who had spent millennia perfecting their shields, had never developed adequate point defenses. Their weapons were all designed to work in conjunction with their barriers. Without the shields, they were helpless against even the most primitive kinetic attacks. In the aftermath, as Xantharian survivors transmitted their surrender, Kethaval found himself face-to-face with Commander Chen via holocommunication. The human looked tired but satisfied. "How?" was all the alien admiral could manage. Chen smiled grimly. "You built the perfect shield to stop a sword. Unfortunately for you, we brought hammers. Very, very patient hammers," she paused, then added with the kind of casual brutality that would become legendary among the galaxy's military academies. "The thing about humans, Admiral, is that when we can't go through something, we don't give up. We just find a bigger rock." The siege of Xantharia Prime became required study at every military institution in known space, not because of its tactical brilliance, but because it demonstrated a fundamental truth about humanity. When faced with an immovable object, they didn't build a better spear. They built a patient, inexorable, utterly unstoppable force, and they were willing to wait as long as it took for physics to do the rest.